Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here to review The Terminator. It is quite interesting to watch this first Terminator compared to all the others. Because honestly, we come to find that this movie, I think, has more of a horror angle than all the others. It also is quite interesting to have found out that originally Arnold was not chosen to be the Terminator. At some point, it was actually to originally be O.J. Simpson. And Arnold was going to be the Kyle Reese character because he wanted to be the character with lines. And while he was going on and talking to James Cameron about this film, and the more that Arnold was more going over every detail about what the Terminator would do, James Cameron just turns to Arnold like, "Why don't you just do this role? Like, why don't you just be the Terminator?" And Arnold's like, "No, like, if anything, like this guy doesn't have any lines, and if anything, also he's the bad guy." And James Cameron is like, "Okay, well, hey, if you do this movie, like if we go on and we do a sequel, we'll kind of do things a lot differently." And so, hence why when we have a sequel, we have Arnold as more of a hero, and he is to go on and have a lot more lines. Like, of course, more of like iconic one-liners, like "Hasta la vistas" and everything like that. It's also really interesting that Arnold is to say that originally he wasn't going to say "I'll be back." At some point, he will mention at some point in some interview that he said "I will be back" was something that he wanted to go with because of his accent. And James like, don't rewrite my film. Plus, also, they tried a number of different takes, and eventually the "I'll be back" was a thing that stuck to the point to where now, like, Arnold still this day at some points is trying to figure out a way to fit that in every one of his films. Um, and it becomes the running joke of him having this catchphrase. Even in stuff like Expendables and other kind of things, he'll go on and he'll throw that line out and be like, "Yeah, you've been back enough." Like, so that what makes those movies funny. So, but anyways, what is this movie about? As of course, like to me, I enjoy the Terminator films. I've gone on to at some point in another channel talk about a good cluster of them, which I found out that it seems that people were actually interested in Terminator films. Yeah, I really go on and I find these movies so interesting because it's the more standout sci-fi films because there are so very few of them. I feel, especially for YouTube, that people really care about and really people are find interesting. So I hope that a lot of people will go on and find this as well as eventually down the road so many other videos that I will do. Uh, but yeah, like I personally just wanted to do this regardless how well it was going to do because I honestly just think that this movie is a lot of fun. And also, it has some really interesting, cool ideas. Also, the movie does have its problems. Like, how is it coincidentally that they go through all these phone numbers in a phone book and this specific Sarah Connor is to be the exact one that is to be the lottery winner of saving the universe because it could have been any number of other Sarah Connors in a phone book. But also, we could say that Kyle Reese seriously was to not go on and remember what Sarah looked like when he even had a picture that he'd gone on to look after so often, but eventually it burned into a fire. So I guess immediately, shortly thereafter, that he completely forgot what she looked like while they were at the Tech Noir. And he, of course, was to have to wait till a Terminator was to act before he can go on and figure things out. But also, we could say that Kyle Reese knew where Sarah was, and that is the reason why he easily stalks her, to where the Terminator has to go on and wait to figure out where she is via this phone call of Ginger and Ginger's place. So, with that said, so in turn, so what is this all about? What is this Terminator thing about? If you've never heard of it in your life, because of course you have. So we would come to find that there are to be these life-like forms making their way from the future to the past of a future of 2029 AD. So, if anything, maybe that'll be creeping up on us pretty soon. But anyways, we'd go on to have both Kyle and both Terminator be going back to the past to eventually come to find that they both have to seek out Sarah Connor. They have no idea where she is in this timeline, so they look her up in the phone book conveniently during this time period. People won't realize what a phone book even is at this point anymore. But so they look her up in a phone book, and so there is a pattern of killings that are going on by the Terminator, randomly finding these addresses of other alternative Sarah Connors and killing them. We'd start to kind of have a lot of this Terminator movie kind of mesh into other Terminator films. Like in, you'd go on to see quite a lot in Terminator Rise of the Machine, where we'd have the female Terminator that goes on to kill a number of Connor's lieutenants, which is kind of fitting the pattern of this. We would also come to find that Kyle is to sawed off his shotgun and have a tie on the end of it, which is to had been taught by him by a guy named Marcus, who we'll see in Terminator Salvation. And also, there is kind of the pattern of the massive truck chase scene that is to be very similar to Judgment Day. But anyways, so as the Terminator is going on and lobbing off all of these women named Sarah Connor, yes, pow! We'd go on to have this pawn shop stealing gun man eventually making his way to try to figure out where Sarah Connor is. And as he makes his way to Ginger's place as she's trying to make some sweet loving to a guy named Matt who just really loves some phone sex. We then would go on to have the Terminator eliminate who he thinks is Sarah Connor to find out that it's Ginger instead, to need to go to the Tech Noir to meet up with the Sarah Connor and find an ID that has her name on it. And as we have the Terminator making its way to Tech Noir, we have Kyle that has also been following Sarah for a while, and Sarah is to continue to hear on the news that people are killing people with her shared name. While she's even at her own work, they first drop off the news of people getting killed in a pattern of the same similar name. To where I think Nancy, who is Sarah's coworker, tells her, "Yeah, you're dead, honey." So Sarah goes on to eventually make a phone call to the police station, desperately hoping that she'll get attached to somebody, because she is going on and telling them that she's being followed. So while she's going into the Tech Noir, as eventually not only Kyle, but then also Terminator will make their way into there, which honestly, it's kind of a very speedy amount of time that the Terminator goes from Ginger's place to then already being at the Tech Noir. But again, like, we just have to go on and just say that, like, it's all about the movie needing to be a lot more fast paced. So as the Terminator targets on Sarah Connor, Kyle jumps in, and eventually Kyle grabs Sarah, runs off with her, and a chase begins within cop cars, and Kyle going on and explaining to Sarah after he goes on questions whether she's hurt or not, about her future, and that she is to be very viable to the future because she is to give birth to a son named John Connor, the leader of the resistance. So Kyle goes on and tries to explain in the best way possible to Sarah about the cyborg she is facing, and that it has human tissue over metal skeleton. And then also goes on to explain Kyle in the future that he's left to be in ruins and needing to grow up within the perils of what eventually is to be after Judgment Day and Skynet taking over. Eventually, not bringing up much about artificial intelligence because we haven't gone on and really found a name really for that until way later on to say, yeah, it's AI. So, to say that artificial intelligence had gotten smarter and is now going on and deciding within the future to wipe out the human race. To have these hunter killers in tank or aerial form, and also the infantry, which is to be eventually a part of Arnold's character as the T-1000 or whatever it ends, or no wait, the whatever the T-101 or whatever the model of that is. So we'd go on to eventually, like, the further they run around here, and the Terminator is to consistently spot both Sarah and Kyle because he'll find her. That's what he does. He doesn't feel pity or fear or remorse, and he absolutely will not stop. Yeah. So, uh, yeah, the whole lines of everything that are to be so iconic, a part of this franchise now, that they have kind of circled around every time, which is always fun. So, as Kyle and Sarah are running away from the Terminator in a cop car, the Terminator is using the cops to try and figure out a way to stop Kyle and Sarah, and there is to at some point be a time where cops all surround Kyle and Sarah's car to then lead them back to a police station where Kyle is to blab about everything going on in the future and how he was able to go from the future to come back here with this time displacement device. Which, in all honesty, they go on, they say that they had gone to destroy it, but we'll come to find that in the future that they can just easily make all kinds of time machines, more so than just the one that we'll see in eventually, is it Genesis? Yeah. Also, for those of you that are probably very much fans of this, you'll probably go on and find later Terminator Genesis is to try as much as possible to try to reboot this. So I like at some point Genesis a little bit better at some points because it adds in just a bunch of stuff that's kind of cool. Like the whole liquid metal Terminator was kind of a cool addition. And also, they're trying to very much recreate everything of the past of this movie, but also, again, giving a lot of additions to it with the whole, hey, yeah, nothing clean and wash day, and yeah, like we've gone on to see here. But then also, we have Arnold coming in and like, I've been waiting for you, and he comes in to take out the original Terminator, and they fight it out. So like, yeah, Genesis is just kind of like this really cool, like, wow, like this movie is all but fun because it's reminding us very much of the very first original film, and we've gone on to also to realize how impactful all the others are, and the weird, goofy natures of which that Arnold turns into the hero character and is to be very much like Talk to the Hand and other sequels. So, uh, so once Sarah Connor is to make her way to the police station. Eventually, the Terminator comes for her because again, that's what he does. So eventually, there is to have a Trexler that goes on to say, "Yeah, we have 30 cops in this police station. Yeah, like if you're gonna be safe anywhere, you're gonna be safe here. Yeah, we'll see about that." So the Terminator goes on to be crashing his way through the police station, making a huge entrance, and just starts blasting his way through all these people like they're standing still or like they're tissue paper, to further go on and say, "Yeah, 30 cops my ass." So the Terminator blasts through this entire police station, forcing then Kyle to beat up a guy that's in his interrogation room so he can get his keys to get back to Sarah, so the two of them can run off together, because Kyle is to be the only one that knows this Terminator more so than anybody. And if anybody could be safe with uh or if anybody could be feeling safe, it would be Sarah with Kyle. So Sarah goes on, runs away with Kyle, and eventually she finds out more about her son and more about the future. And then eventually, here's also the part that's weird. So Kyle and Sarah just dump this car off to the side, and then they go on and they sit under this like uh little area that's kind of like this little open area for them to kind of be like hunkered down under. And that's when Kyle goes on and needs a dressing for his wound, and then Kyle goes on and explains more about his future. Honestly, like that whole little spot there, and then right into the following morning they just go on and get a hotel anyways. Like, why couldn't they have just gone on and dumped that whole like area of which that they were going on and talking to, like that little underbridge or that little tunnel or something, and they could have just went to a hotel and done all that stuff that they did there in the hotel at the Tiki Hotel. Like, what difference does it make? Um, like I guess they could just say it's like, oh yeah, like they just were to go on and get to a spot that was just kind of to be a shady spot in the meantime, and so that's what they did. But like, so yeah, I guess it was like you can't assume that they were going to go on and so easily make their way all the way to this Tiki Hotel. Like, there has to be some rest stop. So I guess that has to make sense for the movie, but also I'm just like, why not just push all this stuff to the hotel? Maybe that would be too convenient for the story. I don't know. But anyways, they get to the hotel after Sarah does some sweet loving with Kyle. Eventually, Sarah is to then go on and call her mother, who's at this cabin. What a mistake that is. Because eventually we'll find that the Terminator is to bust its way through, of course, Sarah's mother's cabin and to pretend to be her, and then find out exactly where Sarah is. All she needs to do is get her phone number and retrace the steps of like, okay, what is your address? And then make his way to the Tiki Motel and then chase after them. So Sarah and Kyle eventually realize the Terminator is there, get attacked by him, and then get into this truck and storm off. They are to go on and have these plastiques, these explosives, which I think was a great idea to kind of even odds because you're against a cyborg. So the number of times that Kyle has to huck these things to eventually at some point be like, yeah, he's going to get shot at some point. And he does. So the more and more I have to realize, like, is every time that Michael Biehn is in a movie, does he say that he always has to get killed? Like, look at every movie that he's been singularly in. Like, he's been in this movie, he's been in Aliens 2. Like, he's gone on to also be in, like, a Scorpion King movie where he gets killed there. Like, Tombstone, dead. Like, every single movie it seems that he's been in that has some real impact, he's been killed off. Like, was that on purpose? Like, Was that in his contract, or was that just a thing that it's just like, okay, maybe this guy has consistently died throughout these films, that we're just going to keep the pattern of always having him die because it's funny. Um, I think I'd gone out to see him in some movie, I think called Victim or something. And I think he was the hero of that film. And so I don't think he died in that movie. But I'm just thinking of all the other films. I'm like, man, he's died in so many films at this point. Um, and also, a lot of people were always so upset that he died in all the films because they're hoping that they could continue his character. But if anything, it makes the most sense for him to die in Terminator, but maybe not all those other movies. Definitely not in Terminator or Aliens. My bad. So, uh, we would go on. So, Kyle and Sarah go on and throw all the explosives. Eventually, the Terminator goes from a motorcycle to a truck because of an accident, and then we start to see that the Terminator is to lose a lot more of its human flesh, and then we get the whole iconic one-liner of "Get out." So the Terminator chases both Sarah and Connor down to this warehouse that is to have a number of machines that Kyle goes on and turns all on, and eventually to come back to them needing to do that consistently, so that way the Terminator has issues tracking them. So I find that that's kind of a clever callback whenever they do that, as well as also it's like a strategy. So as they fumble and stumble while having to kind of have this door be this like stopping mechanism, Sarah and Kyle, of course, realize that they're just trying to escape this threat, but it's always going to be after them. So they finally have to do this in and figure out a way to take it out. But they have no weapons at this point at their disposal besides one last plastique. So Kyle goes on and bats it back and forth with this metal rod because that's all he has left. And eventually, we come to having Kyle use the one last plastique, which leaves Sarah to have to go on and fend for herself. While I think she pulls a piece out of her leg, and then faces off against a now torn in half Terminator that is to be crawling after her, and she has to use this compressor to do him in to tell him that he's terminated, motherfucker, or terminated is what she says. So really, by the end of it all, having Sarah go on and do that right off in the sunset, where she ends up getting freaking worked by a kid who takes her picture. But then eventually that picture will be so iconic that they try to go on and replicate it in not only this movie, but I think in the other film. So, with that said, I think it's about that time to get in more of the breakdown and spoilers, anything that I forgot about or anything of more detail that I didn't get into, which was really barely bones of anything because I pretty much said everything within these 20 some odd minutes. So, with that said, I think it's about that time to go on and say that I have no idea where exactly this is as far as like if it's conveniently able to see somewhere. I didn't do the due diligence and homework that time. But if anything, also, if you've already been here for 20 minutes, at some point also I'll go on and I'll give you a bootlegish app. You will be able to go on and watch the Terminator for absolutely free. And that'll be through you having a mobile device, a Google Play Store, being able to download apps called Zelifonic, Zelivonic, or also you can find apps like Clede Plus, KLEDE Plus, and be able to find this movie for absolutely free. Or also, if for whatever reason those apps don't work for you, there is to be a long amount of time that this movie has been out there. At some point, things change, things no longer exist. Let me know in the comments below if you want some alternative apps that I'll happily be able to give you, so that way you'll have multiple different apps to use whenever you want. Maybe you'll want an anime app, so you can watch whatever you want for anime. Because eventually I'm going to go out of my way to, at some point, cover some anime stuff at some point on this channel. If I haven't already, because it'll probably be on here. Because it'll be in the future! But anyways, I'm just really hoping that this review does well, or better at least than the last one. Um, because again, like I had fun watching this, rewatching this, and I know that this movie is probably go on and probably be like, oh yeah, we know the beats and the ways that this all is break down, and I get it. But you know what? I can still have fun. Like there is going to be bigger and more titles that are going to come through this channel's way. I'm going to have to make better decisions at some point of what to do in the future. But if anything, I'm just enjoying what I'm doing now. So I hope that really comes across, if nothing else. So, with that said, I think it's about that time to go into the coveted dance because I think it's about that time to go into spoil time. Spoil time. It's about that time to spoil this movie. Let me know in the comments below what would be your favorite science fiction film because I think there is very rarefied air of that kind of existing at this point. Let me know also what is be your favorite Terminator film because I'm sure probably the Terminator 2 Judgment Day is probably a good chunk of number of people's favorite. But also, I'd like to go on and maybe hope that some people also are to like alternatively other Terminator films. Maybe they like Genesis because it kind of recaptures this movie. Maybe people are to go on and like other kind of maybe the Sarah Connor Chronicles, that show. Maybe you'll like that. And that gave you a gateway into be like, okay, what is this show about? I've never heard of Terminator. There's a whole franchise of movies that exist. Great, I can watch all those, and yada yada yada. So, with that said, I think it's about that time to go into full-on spoilers. So, letting you know now, this is the point at which that I get into way too much detail, and I go through every beaten note and everything that has happened in here in a severely condensed version, but which I've kind of already condensed it down heavily. But if anything, let's get into the nitty-gritty stuff that I didn't bring up in prior. So, the very beginning of this starts off in Los Angeles 2029. We'd come to find that there is to be a showing of the Hunter Killer tank, which I think we'll see like the prototype of in Terminator Rise of the Machines, as well as also the Hunter Killer aerial, which we'll see again better in the same Rise of the Machines movie. And they'll be a lot smaller. Eventually, they'll get bigger after time, because eventually, we'll see in like Salvation that they'll have like a whole warehouse, and we'll very much see how they're like making all the stuff that they're making. And so I'm like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Like, I love how eventually, when in the further films, regardless how good they are, how we'll go on and actually see the future part and be like, oh, okay, now we can understand more about how they're going and able to put this all together in the future. So, because that's all I really cared about is all the future stuff instead of all of the stuff going on in the past. And I kind of like how they kind of go back and forth in that in some of the movies, at least. So, so we get flashes of the hunter killers and we get a whole like beginning crawl that is to be talking about a nuclear fire and a battle that is to be waged in the future and so on and so forth. And so we then cut to Los Angeles in 1984 with a garbage truck that is just trying to pick up a dumpster, and all of a sudden there is to be electricity that is flying all over the ground. We'd have the garbage dumpster man being like, what the hell, what's going on, da da da. So, all of a sudden, here's where we have, of course, the Terminator putting his almost superhero landing pose like down, almost. And so, the Terminator gets up and starts walking his way to see the city and looking around it. Then he goes on to come to find his way to a group of punks that are kind of jostling towards one another looking at this telescope. So the punks start to notice the Terminator and they're like, hey man, look at this guy. So as the Terminator approaches, they go and like, hey, wash day, nothing clean. And then the Terminator is like, well, yeah, nothing clean. So as soon as he goes on and asks for their clothes, here's where they whip out the knives and start trying to cut into him, which do absolutely nothing. There's a slice that happens. Arnold goes on or the Terminator goes on and rams his fist into one of the punks that kills him, and then eventually, as the Terminator quickly takes out these punks to leave one last left that is looking at him, and his eyes are just popping out of his brain for how wide they are, he goes on to realize, okay, I'll just give up my clothes. Like, I'll just rip them off and give them to you. So, now we cut to a hobo in a dark alley that eventually is waiting for Kyle Reese to plop down so he can steal his pants. Kyle goes on and drops down, and his falling is a lot more like painful, and he's more in like a fetal position than of course the Terminator was. Like, him was just like so easily, like he just kind of goes down into like a pose and he just gets up and is like, meh, okay. Kyle plopping down, he really like really shows how much pain he's in. So Kyle passes by this hobo, and so the hobo goes on and says, hey man, did you ever see a bright light? And all of a sudden these cops start driving by, and they just notice some man in this dark alley, and so the cops start chasing after him, not knowing any better. So all of a sudden the cops go to this hobo and they said, hey man, he just stole my pants, and so they start chasing after him. There isn't any reasoning for why they're chasing after him, but they just do so, and then eventually I guess the whole stealing of the pants thing, I guess, was the only liable reason for the whole chase to occur. So as the cops are chasing after Kyle, Kyle is too fast for them. Kyle goes on and rolls over these cars and eventually circles back to grab one of the cops, dispatch his gun from him, and then eventually asks what date and what year it is, so that way he will know exactly if he's in the right time and place to hopefully retrieve Sarah Connor. So Kyle goes running off, and the one cop who had gotten his gun stolen reunites with the other and says, hey, yeah, let's go this way. He went this way. If anything, he has my gun now, so let's go. So the two cops make their way into a store of sorts. It looks like a general goods store, but I'm not quite sure. It might have even been a mall. So Kyle goes on and slips through all the clothing racks, and eventually, while the cops are scanning around, here's parts, of course, that we're going to go on and duplicate in somewhere in the future within Genesis. So Kyle goes on and reobtains obtains this gray trench coat, goes on to eventually find Nike sneakers that he has to press to his feet to make sure that they match his. And then he goes to this photo booth to hide away while he gets all these trench coat and shoes on, to where he adjusts the shoes as a cop passes. Kyle gets out of the photo booth and scrambles off up this escalator, for eventually the cops to notice him, or to notice that there was somebody maybe possibly going up this escalator. Kyle gets into this fire escape, makes his way back to the cop car to retrieve this shotgun. Here is where Kyle completely gets away with all this and is to vanish, eventually sliding the shotgun into his trench coat and eventually walking off as if no one is going to notice a guy walking around with a shotgun poking out of his trench coat. That scene kind of really was to kind of bother me a little bit, but if anything, like, this guy only has a trench coat and that's it. Yeah. He couldn't have gone on and gotten some shirts and some more layers there, buddy. I guess maybe that chopping spree didn't last too long now, did it? So here's where Kyle goes into a phone booth, and it's quite interesting how both Terminator and Kyle, they go into these phone booths to try to obtain this bit of information of where Sarah Connor's address is and her phone number and whatever. Because Kyle goes on and is to kind of just get into this phone booth and where Terminator goes on and finds somebody is using the phone booth, rips them away from it, and then goes on to go through the phone booth to look at Sarah Connor, and then leaves. Whereas Kyle goes on is to see the plethora of different Sarah Connors on this phone book. He rips the page and then he leaves. So now we cut to Sarah Connor as we, I think, have her go to a Big Burgers restaurant, or it says the word big on it. So if anything, I don't know exactly. So Sarah makes her way to this restaurant via this scooter, and eventually she'll say how she's late. And also, I think Nancy, who comes from behind her, is also late. Sarah will also go on and take this bike chain and try to latch up her bike so no one takes it. Yeah. So Sarah goes on, makes her way, and clocks in, and that's how we can tell this is Sarah Connor, because the name shows up. So here is where we have the Terminator that is going on to find a random car. He breaks in the window, opens it, and then, luckily, there's no car alarms in this time period. So the Terminator rips right behind the steering wheel and is able to figure out how to so easily have this car be started, and he drives off. It's quite interesting to see in Terminator Rise of the Machines where the Terminator just goes on and just like has its finger just locks into the car and just could easily start it by touching it. That's kind of the interesting change where they have to hotwire everything in the prior videos. Now at this point it's so easy that you just have the Terminator just use its computer finger to be able to control the car. So Sarah starts to get orders out, and she goes to this table, and she's very much confused. She's going on and asking them about some order that it seemed that no one at this table ordered. And also there is to be this kid that has this scoop of ice cream that dumps it into Sarah's pocket. And one of the people working, or one of the people eating at this restaurant was so happy about that. It's like, hey kid, maybe I should give you the tip. Nancy goes on and turns to Sarah. It's like, well, yeah, just remember in 100 years, no one's going to care about this, or no one's going to remember it. And you'll be probably dead anyways. So, in 100 years, who's going to care? That's what she says. So now, the Terminator makes his way to the Alamo sports shotguns ammo place. What a great name. So the Alamo. So the Terminator goes on and starts asking about 12 gauges and then a 45 long side laser sight, which will be the most iconic gun, I think, out of all these, because all the other ones will be generic. The Uzi 9mm and all these other things. And we have, of course, the owner of the gun shop who's like, man, you really know your guns. As Arnold goes on and talks about a plasma rifle, and we'd have the clerk that's like, we don't have that here. Like, just look at and just anything that you see behind me is what we got. So, at some point, as uh, we would go on, like, the store clerk is like, okay, well, like, it seems that you're really wanting to go on and have a lot of home defense here. So, which one do you want to pick? And the Terminator says all. And he's like, well, great. I'm gonna close up soon today. Uh, so if anything, he goes on to mention about how many days it's gonna take for the handguns, but also that he'll be able to take the rifles and certain other things kind of home with him today. As the Terminator goes on and starts to put bullets inside of one of the weapons, we have the clerk that says, hey, you can't do that, and the Terminator says, wrong, and he shoots him and kills him. So that fires off the first killing spree. So now we have Kyle, who is going on and cutting the back of the shotgun to make it shorter. I almost thought at some point he'd cut like the barrel of this, but I guess he actually just cuts the handle so he can have it slip into his trench coat a little bit better. Also, Kyle is to tie the string of his shotgun, which eventually, again, I think we see Marcus teaching him how to do. Marcus Wright, which will be played by Sam Worthington. So here's where we have the Terminator going on, making his way to the phone booth, ripping the guy away from it so he can look at the phone book names of Sarah Connors. So now we cut to Terminator going on and finding the first Sarah Connor on the phone book. As the Terminator walks by this neighborhood, he immediately is to have a dog that is consistently barking on him. We'll find out in the future that that is a way for the humans to figure out if there's a Terminator nearby, because barking dogs. Oddly enough, like, there's always a dog-cat thing going on to figure out about monstrous beings. Like, we go on to find that Aliens is to be with cats, whereas seemingly this movie is to be with dogs. Seems that it's an interesting pattern of that. I think that's also why in Terminator 2, why they kill Wolfie, because the dog would be barking endlessly, and the parents would go on like, man, why is that dog so barking so much? Ah! And that's why, because the Terminator knows better. So here is the point where the Terminator goes on, knocks on the door, Sarah, yes, bam, smashes through, whips out his laser-sighted gun, and fires into this wrong Sarah Connor, and she is now dead. So we have Sarah that is to kind of make her way back into the back of this restaurant, and Nancy pulls Sarah aside and is like, hey, you gotta look at this. So Sarah goes on and watches the news report where they're talking about a killing that had just occurred by a woman by the name of Sarah Connor, saying that she's a mother of two, age, I think, like 45 or 40 something, or no, wait, 35, my bad. I was a little off by 10 years. So Nancy tells Sarah that, you're dead, honey. That's what she tells her. So now we cut to Kyle. Kyle, it seems to be right around a construction site where there is a man operating a crane. Kyle is to try and commandeer this car and try to hotwire it, but he also falls asleep. Kyle is to be haunted by his past, which is technically the future. So at some point, both Kyle and a woman named Pharaoh are trying to make their way around this battlefield site where there are to be skull and bones lodged all over the place. So we have Kyle, I think, with a woman named Pharaoh, from where I was to go on and kind of make my way of Googling and figuring out. So Kyle goes on and sees this hunter killer tank and decides that they're going to use these can grenades to huck at this hunter killer tank. And eventually, as they do that, Pharaoh ends up getting spotted and killed, and so the grenades explode shortly thereafter. That Kyle then has to run to other members of the resistance to get into this car to drive off, but eventually, as aerial hunter killers and other just hunter killers in this area start to see this car driving along, they try to blast and take it down, as well as also there's a resistance member that on top of the car is to be blasting back, and eventually it leads this car to get flipped over to have Kyle seemingly be surrounding in flames as he is trying to escape this car, which obviously he has to be successful, or otherwise he wouldn't be in the past telling us about our future now, would he? So we have Kyle that goes on to wake up with, again, the crane moving around, and of course, having him in very familiar sounds to just be haunted. Maybe the reason why Kyle has to fall asleep so easily around this area is because the noise is so familiar to him. Maybe that's why he was to so easily fall asleep here. So we have both Ginger and Sarah, as Sarah is to now make her way home. For the two of them making their way to the mirror to try to look nice for their date that is occurring at some point soon. It seems that Sarah is going to go on and take a phone call from a guy named Dan, who is to be a little bit too busy for her. And Sarah goes on and says, well, I can't go on this date tonight, so if anything, I'll go to the movies. But if anything, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. We'd come to find that Sarah is to be answering a phone call from a pervy guy that does phone sex. Immediately he goes on and talks about how he's going to unbutton her blouse and then take her jeans off and do all these things one by one and all this. So Sarah ends up going on to ask this person, who is this? And Matt goes up like, oh, it's me, it's Matt. And so Sarah's like, yeah, I get it. It's just, I'm just ribbing you, Matt. And so Sarah goes on to Ginger and calls Matt a creep and then gives Ginger the phone, where eventually Matt restarts with his whole love and talk, let's just say. So we're going to tailor some things here. So, because all this is about both Matt and Ginger getting together at Ginger's place so that way they can sleep together. And so that way also they can be listening to music. Well, I think Ginger's listening to music while Matt is basically effing her. So also it's kind of weird. I had gone on to recently review Top Gun. So I have the same guy in both Top Gun and this movie. Man, it was a pretty good time for this guy to kind of get acting gigs. I remember him also in like the Steve Martin movie, Roxanne? Let me know in the comments below if you want that movie reviewed, because I'm sure people may have not have actually been tuning in to this part of the review anyways, but whatever. It could be a fun movie to probably review, because I think it is fairly popular. Well, my mom watches it all the time, so that means nothing. But maybe it is popular to somebody. Anyways, so now we cut to the police station with Traxler and and Volkovich, uh, Volkovich, Traxler, and Volkovich. Ah, what a mouthful. So we would go on to have Volkovich that hands Traxler this current investigation of the whole Sarah Connor killers. So it's funny how Volkovich goes on to go in depth about this whole piece of paper for the audience and not for Traxler, because Traxler is going on and turning to Volkovich of like, hey, these glasses, you know these work, right? And so it's like, well, yeah, it's all for the audience. So Volkovich hands Traxler this report about a Sarah Connor Secretary 35 who was shot 6 times. And so both Traxler and Volkovich are realizing that more than likely there's a pattern that is starting to merge here, and that Sarah Connors are all getting killed, and they hate the fact that there is a pattern because it's like, oh man, just wait for the news to get a hold of this. They're going to call him like the phone book killer or some other weird, goofy thing because a lot of people just can't wait to put names on things. But also, a lot of times, actually, when they put a phone book killer or whatever goofy name, it actually does help the cops catch the person a lot quicker, supposedly. But if anything, I'm not a police officer, so I've just gone on and watched a load of crime shows and movies, and yeah, um, at some point in those like real life things, yeah, they go on and they say that like, yeah, hopefully somebody goes on and slaps a name on this character will catch him quicker because word will get around and word of mouth will happen. Anyways, so um, so if anything, Traxler and Volkovich hate the weird ones, but when are they not weird? Because it's a 1 day pattern killing where all these people end dead who are Sarah Connor. So now we have Sarah and Ginger who are all dolled up for their dates but nowhere to go. Because obviously Ginger will go on and get all dressed, but then she'll get right back into her robe anyways because she'll just be sleeping with her boyfriend Matt, and eventually she'll get killed anyways. Sarah will be going on and deciding to just go to a movie because, again, her date will ditch her. Ginger will go on and say to Sarah, it's like, well, yeah, like, even though he does have a Porsche, yeah, he's kind of just he's just not a good enough, uh, a good enough guy for you, Sarah, because it's a Friday night of all things. So Sarah's going on and scrambling for looking for their iguana named Pugsley. And then we'll go on and be like, well, at least Pugsley still loves me. And so she puts it in the cage. It's like, ah, nice tender moment there. So Sarah goes on and tells Ginger to have a good night as she leaves for the movies. As she goes on and opens the door, she gets scared by Matt. And so as Sarah goes on, leaves into her scooter, we then have Kyle that is waiting parked by a car to track Sarah down. Conveniently for Kyle, he was to go on and find the right Sarah, I guess. Because I guess there was only so few left. But it's also interesting once Sarah finds out that there's more people named Sarah Connor that get killed. She goes on and she also realizes that she too is in the phone book, and then she starts to get worried. But, anyways, so as Traxler and Volkovich make their way through the station, all of a sudden there's a big handful of news reporters that are all starting to ask both Volkovich and Traxler anything about the Sarah Connor pattern killer. And we'd go on to immediately have Traxler that says no comment, but then goes back to be like, you know what? Maybe we should probably go on and use these reporters to work for us for a change. and maybe hope that we can go on and get this next Sarah Connor to be alive, and then hopefully also find who this killer is, because that's their plan. So, because Traxxer will ask Volkovich, "Hey, have you called the next Sarah Connor on that phone book list?" And Volkovich is like, "Well, yeah, I've tried a number of times, and every time I get the answering machine." And so he's like, "Well, hey, call her again." So Volkovich goes on and calls the phone to eventually find he gets the message again, of having us realize that both Matt and Ginger are so focused on their lovemaking that really there's not going to have them be able to get to the phone. Volkovich says same shit, and eventually, uh, they realize that again, this guy's going to be called the phone book killer, and so he might as well take advantage and look nice for the people that are out there covering the news, so he can make a statement. And so Traxxer goes on and asks Volkovich, like, "How do I look?" And he's like, "You look like shit." He's like, "Oh, thanks." So he goes out there. So here is where Sarah is to be now at this location to get a bite to eat. And then all of a sudden, here is through the reports of another Sarah Connor getting killed. Sarah is to see that people are trying to get the channel changed, and she's like, "No, like, don't touch it." So she overhears that another Sarah Connor is getting killed. She runs to the phone book that's by this phone that is out of order, and Sarah checks to see that she's on the phone book. So Sarah gets out of the restaurant she comes out of and eventually finds that there's somebody following her. She sees the reflection of this guy going in the same exact direction she is, so Sarah makes her way into the tech noir. Sarah goes on and asks the ticker Tate person, the person who's trying to get tickets to get into the tech noir. Sarah goes on and asks if this person has a phone, and they, of course, have one. So Sarah starts walking away. The person asks for 450. So Sarah goes on and pays to get in there, and then she tries to call the police station, but it seems that they're really just having her to be on hold. If she wants a police car to be sent out to her, she'll have to wait on the line more. So because all the lines are busy currently. So Sarah goes on and hangs up the phone and waits. So here is where the Terminator makes his way into Sarah Connor's uh, apartment complex, her place. So we'd have Ginger and Matt that have gone through the throes of passion. Ginger gets back on her robe and starts to make her way to the fridge, where she's going on grabbing some bread and a number of things, I guess, to make a sandwich. So as Ginger goes on and gets all these things from the refrigerator, all of a sudden she notices the iguana that scared the crap out of her above the fridge. And while that's going on, Ginger is also listening to headphones, so she's not hearing the battling that's going on. Because we would have the Terminator sneaking in to discover Matt in this bed. And as Matt wakes to see the Terminator going on and grabbing this lampshade or this lamp piece to try to battle with the Terminator with, which immediately we'd go on to have the Terminator that starts chucking Matt around, throwing him to this glass window, throwing him into this mirror, eventually throwing him into this either dresser or desk. And then inevitably, as Ginger makes her way back to the room, Matt goes flying to this door, obviously to be killed by the impact. And then the Terminator is to be thrusting out his laser pointed gun to go after Ginger. Ginger goes on to throw all of her food that she had in her hands all onto the ground to run off. She eventually dives to get shot by the Terminator, to where then he goes on and hovers over her body and fires more shots into her. While that's going on, all of a sudden there is another message coming from this answering machine, if there hasn't been a couple already. Because there had been the one from Dan, and then there was, I think, one from Sarah Connor's mother, I think, previously. So this one is from Sarah herself, going on to explain uh, that she's at a place called the Tech Noir, and that she feels a little scared because she feels that there's somebody following her. If anything, she's going on to try to call the police, but they keep transferring her around. So at some point, Sarah's hoping that Ginger will answer the phone, so that way they can talk, and also uh, Sarah can figure out what to do. So the Terminator goes on to crush these headphones, starts to thumb through the parts of this place to find Sarah's scheduling book, but then also finds her college ID, and then they go on like, so this is the Sarah Connor that I was looking for. So here is where now finally Sarah Connor can get a hold of Traxler, and immediately Sarah's like, please don't put me on hold, and Traxler's like, no, you gotta hold me. Okay, what do you need? So Sarah goes on to explain who she is, why she's calling, and that she's at a place called Tech Noir. And Traxler goes on to tell her, hey, like, you're in a public place that's very safe. Stay there. Uh, we'll get a car to pick you up. Uh, if anything, don't even go to the bathroom. Like, yeah, just stay somewhere where people can see you, and we'll try to get to you. So now we'll see that the Terminator is making his way into the Tech Noir, being grabbed by a man after the ticker tape person is to say that, hey, yeah, this guy didn't pay. So the bouncer goes on and tries to grab the Terminator for eventually his hand to get broken. And so here's where the Terminator starts scanning around. Kyle is also within the Tech Noir, off in the distance, or over by the bar. And so Sarah decides that she's going to just go on and grab a table. And as she sits, she accidentally bumps this condiment or something onto the ground. She retrieves it, and at that same simultaneous time, the Terminator is passing by her. As the Terminator is to scan the entire place and not see where Sarah is, eventually, as Sarah gets back up and is to finally be spotted by the Terminator makes his way back to her. The Terminator starts to go on and pushing people out of the way to get to Sarah, and then eventually gets his laser pointed gun out, and Kyle is to then thrust out his shotgun, push people out of the way, to then shoot into the Terminator as he has his laser pointed sight right on Sarah's forehead. The Terminator goes blasting back, falling onto the ground, but inevitably will get back up. There is a shootout going on between both Kyle and Terminator as the Terminator is to whip out his Uzi and start blasting through people. As Sarah goes on and starts to run out of the Tech Noir, she is to have a person that gets shot behind her that drops her down. As the Terminator gets ever so close to Sarah Connor and gets close to the point of a kill shot. Here's where Kyle comes in, starts blasting off his shotgun, then having the Terminator thrust through this window and fall onto the ground. Kyle goes on and grabs Sarah and says the iconic line, "Come with me if you want to live." I guess that's the one thing that I completely kind of glaze through when I was to talk about stuff before. There is, interestingly enough, so many iconic lines that they continue to slip throughout this franchise. But I always love it, and I always like how they keep fitting those in. Um, yeah, it's always a lot of fun. I like. I think a lot of people probably just be saying that, like, well, hey, maybe we should go on and we should have different phrases for every one of these sequels, or maybe if they ever reboot this, which only James Cameron can decide that. Um, like if they're going to go on and they're going to keep the phrases in, or go on and completely change to have one-liners that eventually will have nothing to do with prior films, but will probably stick with the franchise. If anything, also, I guess like the future is not set is also a very iconic line. Um, anyways, so because they go on and they say that at some point in a number of other films where they say the future is not set. So I guess that's also a one-liner. Anyways, so Sarah and Kyle start running off here, and the Terminator chases after them. We'd have Kyle that goes on to set off an explosion that eventually will leave the Terminator's hair to completely change into the more kind of like spiked up hair that were kind of very much more iconic to see him in posters and all kinds of things. I didn't quite understand why they had to change the hair in this movie, but I guess maybe that was their ultimate plan all along. Um, Maybe there was some contractual obligations that Arnold still had with some other film or something while doing this. I don't know. Like I don't know why they changed the hair. That is to be kind of like my one thing of this movie. It's like, did they just do it just for the film? Um, to have him have different hairstyles, like, was them saying that his hair change was just to try to deliver a much more horror like approach to this movie with the way his hair is. Um, I'm so very curious about that. Like, also, like, I'm kind of curious, like, what kind of screen test that they were gonna do, uh, and how this character could have looked wildly different is kind of what I'm curious about. Or if they had like the biker thing like always nailed, that like that was always going to be how he's forever going to look. But anyways, so uh, as Kyle and Sarah find a car, a Cadillac that they take over, the Terminator goes on and hops on top of the windshield, smashes through it, which eventually Traxler and Volkovich will go on to say that it's like, oh, he was just on PCP, even though he's actually a cyborg in this film. Also, they have to, like, somebody had gone on and explained how bashing through a windshield, like, is not something so easy to do. Like, they really had to go on and, in some point somewhere, explain the whole windshield breaking in this movie to say that you would really have to go on and have a machine that could apply a vicious amount of force to be able to break through a windshield like the Terminator so easily does. And I don't know if they explained whether or not it could be feasibly done through a cyborg like this, but yeah, the whole windshield breaking thing in any movies, like I'm to go on and just remember how difficult it was, and see how in other films it's just the easiest thing to do, break through a windshield, and it's not. But anyways, so as Kyle and Sarah are swerving along to try to get the Terminator off their windshield. Eventually, the Terminator goes flying and rolling off of this car to have at some point where a policeman stops, notices the Terminator, and calls for a hit and run. The Terminator gets right back up, grabs the policeman, bashes him and crushes him, and then goes and takes over his car and drives off and starts chasing off against Kyle and Sarah again. Going on to using the radio and using the policeman's voice as a way to try to use the policeman to find out where Kyle and Sarah are. So as the Cadillac starts to swerve around, we would then have Kyle that turns to Sarah and asks if she's hurt. Here's where in the movie we have a lot more dialogue going on, where Kyle has to go on and mention who his name is and that he's here to help Sarah, and she doesn't understand it. So Kyle goes on and explains to Sarah that she's been targeted for termination, as if she knows what that means. Sarah goes on and says that this is a mistake, and Kyle says that it's very important for her to live. And that if anything, the thing is after her is to be a machine. And it's a Cyberdyne System 101. My bad. Like there's so many T800s and T1000s and all these other things, all these numbers, all these model numbers I'm supposed to freaking memorize. Like as if I'm gonna be able to go and figure all these out. Anyways, so Kyle goes on to explain that it's basically like a robot or a cyborg, and it's a cyber organism. And Sarah goes on to be like, well, wait a minute, like it was bleeding. And so eventually Kyle goes on to find that eventually the Terminator's cop car does go on to get next to Kyle's, and Kyle goes on and bashes into it. And eventually, after bashing into it, they get into this parking lot. So now that there is a little bit more downtime, Kyle goes on to explain about how it's human tissue over metal skeleton, and that flesh, hair, skin, blood, it all is to eventually be grown into the cyborg. Like, we'll go on and see in Genesis where the Terminator in that, Arnold, he goes on to age. So we have to go on and really explain how, yeah, like these Terminators, like they do have their own unique things about them. To not all just look like they're going to just be looking the same forever. So I like that whole idea. Anyway, also, like, we have, like, the Terminator Genesis was like, I'm old. It's like, well, yeah, you're not obsolete, but you're old. So Kyle goes on and explains about how difficult it was to spot the Terminator because these are to actually be better models. At some point, originally they were just rubber skin and you could spot those easily. Now they actually look more human-like. So Sarah says there's no technology like that out there, and Kyle says in 40 years from now there will be. And Sarah's like, well, that's in the future, and Kyle's like, yeah, possible future. So as Sarah goes on and is to start to wrestle with Kyle to try to escape, at one point she even bites down on his hand, and Kyle goes on to say, yeah, like, the Terminators don't feel pain, but I do. Sarah goes on to ask if there's a possibility that Kyle will be able to defeat this Terminator. And Kyle's like, I don't know, with these primitive weapons, like, I don't think it's a possibility. Like, I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. But we'll figure something out. We'll have to, because they're obligated. They have to. They have to save Sarah Connor, to save the world, to save the Resistance, because she's the key. Because she goes on and gives birth to John Connor, and eventually he'll go on to explain that to her. So, the Terminator goes on through his cop car and starts scanning through this parking lot. And Kyle goes on to explain that they need to transition into a different car. So they scramble into another car, and Kyle now has to explain to Sarah why is it that the Terminator wants her. And Kyle goes on to explain in the future there's going to be a nuclear war a few years from now, and there will be survivors. And the ones who had gone on to make this war were all machines. Was a defense network. They had gone on to sabotage themselves by trusting an artificial life form to man and take control of everything, and it became smart, and it decided to decide humanity's fate within a microsecond and start to exterminate them. Sarah goes on to ask if Kyle was alive during this war, and Kyle says, no, I was born after the fact. I was in ruins. And Kyle was starving. He was starving, Marvin. So, if anything, the only thing that he could do is just hide from hunter killers and go into camps where he was forced to get burned by this barcode and to work loading bodies as a in these disposal units night and day. So but at some point Kyle goes on and eventually meets up with John Connor, who had told him how to fight, and turned all the Terminators into junk and brought them back from the brink. And the name of the man, of course, is John Connor, is the one that he's referencing. And so telling Sarah that she is to have a son, an unborn son. And that Sarah goes on to be like, well, at least I know what to name him. Eventually they'll go on to ask, like, hey, did I ever meet the father to my son? And Kyle's like, yeah, I don't know. Like, if anything, it's before the war. I have no idea. Plus, also, John never talked about his father much, because of course he didn't, because Kyle could not have gone on and fully found out from John that it's like, hey, you're my father. I think Genesis, they do go on and they do explain that. But it takes so many movies to finally get that out. Anyways, so as Kyle goes on to hotwire another car, the Terminator zeroes in on them and starts firing away at this car. So as Kyle and Sarah peel out of there, being chased by the Terminator in this cop car, Kyle tells Sarah to take the wheel as he takes out his shotgun and starts firing at the cop car. Here's, of course, where there is an accident that happens. The cop car goes careening into this wall, and as Sarah and Kyle swerve, there are all of these cop cars swerving to whip out their guns and tell everybody, all right, like put your hands up, get out of the car. Kyle gets out of the car with his shotgun, and Sarah says, please no, they'll kill you. Kyle gets out of the car without any weapon and has his hands up and gets arrested. Sarah and Kyle make their way into the police station as one of the police officers go into the cop car that had gotten into an accident, peering in to realize that the Terminator has vanished. Sarah makes her way to the police station, and Traxler goes on and gives her something to drink. So Sarah is to find out that her best friend Ginger is dead, as well as also Matt. Sarah asks if maybe she should look at the bodies, and they're like, no, we've already identified them, and we know who they are, so it's okay. So Traxler then brings in Mr. Silverman, who we'll go on to find is in a number of different Terminator films. I think maybe he is in Rise of the Machine, and I don't know where else. At some point, we see him again, and it's yeah, like he's in Terminator 2. He's in Rise of the Machines. Like he's in a handful of these movies, so it is pretty cool to kind of see this character that kind of reoccurs over and over again. Eventually, J.K. Simmons is in Genesis. So I was kind of getting confused of whether he's in Genesis or not, but he's not. It's J.K. Simmons. But anyways, so, but J.K. Simmons isn't playing that guy. J.K. Simmons is just playing some cop. Anyways, so Sarah is to find out that Dr. Silverman is to be this criminal psychologist, and so Sarah goes on and asks Silverman, it's like, well, hey, is Kyle crazy? And Silverman is like, well, we're going to find that out. We're going to find out how crazy he probably already is. The Terminator makes his way to this apartment room that we aren't really sure if he's going on and he's actually renting or he's just sneaking into. The Terminator goes on into this building to eventually repair his arm, that his fingers aren't working that well. Because, of course, I'm sure the whole him breaking into the windshield thing was probably the reason why he broke his arm. After he goes on and he takes a, I want to say scalpel, but that's not really what it is. Like, it looks like one, but it's like a little cutting tool. The Terminator cuts into his arm, goes on to do some adjustments to fix his broken arm, and then eventually he'll go on to cut into his own eye to showcase his cyborg-like eye, which at some point we'll get a mixture of real Terminator and claymation, which is actually like, that's quite cool, but it also kind of like, like, I think at some point somebody had gone on to say that they kind of perfected it to make it look cleaner, but anyways, I guess I can just enjoy the original of it and all its imperfections and to be like, oh yeah, this is cool. This is cool to watch. So now we cut to Silverman talking to Kyle. So Kyle has to mention that he's from the year 2027, but eventually also like it's the year 2029 AD. So, anyways, when Kyle leaves. But anyways, so the more that Kyle starts to mention about the future, and Volkovich is turning to Traxler and like, man, this story is pretty good. Like, this guy can make a movie out of this, or a screenplay or something. I wish that's what he could have said, because that would have been a little funny inside joke. So, Kyle goes on and mentions about the computer defense system of the future, and how Silverman is to kind of recap Kyle's story and to say that, like, this cyborg is going back to the past to retroactively abort a woman's child that is to be the changing of the tide of this future war. Am I getting that right? And Kyle is to, like, well, yeah, that's basically in a nutshell, like what's really going on. So Volkovich goes on and talks about how Silverman had before uh, gone on to have this other person that he had gone on to talk to, and so then they go back to Kyle. So Kyle says that Skynet's big plan is to try to figure out how to wipe John Connor out of existence because he's to be the only one that has knowledge and is to be able to fight the Terminators much more so than anyone else. And so Silverman is to say, it's like, okay, so how you went and traveled back to the future is with this time displacement equipment, and the Terminator had gotten through before you did, and after you went through it, they destroyed this time displacement thing. How are you going to get home? And Kyle says, well, I'm never going to. If anything, also, no one goes home and no one comes back. Immediately as Kyle says that, I immediately kind of groan. Because again, if I haven't said already, there's several different times that they just recreate the time machine. And it eventually gets even more easy that they end up putting a time machine together within sequel films. So honestly, going on and saying that there's only going to be to have been one shot at this is kind of laughable at this point. But I think with Kyle's knowledge of him thinking that they only had that one chance, uh, yeah, I guess is to go on and be like, well, hey, like Kyle doesn't really have um, really any knowledge past where he was to have leapt from. So yeah, like, anyways, moving on here. So the Terminator goes on and cuts his eye out, gets a pair of glasses on, and moves the mattress from under the bed to get these guns, so that way he can make his way to this police station. Silverman goes on to now be with Traxler, Volkovich, and Sarah Connor to watch over the tape that he was to be a part of, and further see that Kyle is to talk about the living organism and the reason why he could not have gone on and had the Terminator go through without living tissue is because nothing dead will go. And they couldn't have had weapons, they could have had future technology, nothing. It had to be living, a breathing thing. And the Terminator ended up getting living tissue and all these kind of things to eventually get through the time traveling device, or the time displacement device. So Silverman goes on and says that he can go on and make a career off of this one guy. And and how Kyle is to think about all of these things are so intricate and so detailed. And so Kyle is starting to get annoyed into the clip to the point where he's going on and saying, now show me to Sarah Connor, like, I need to see the authorities here. If anything, he's going to come for her. That's what he does. And he'll come for her and he'll slit her throat. And, like, all of a sudden, like, Silverman is like, oh, yeah, I probably should cut this tape. As Traxler is like, hey, man, like, she's listening to this. So, Traxler and Volkovich goes on to tell Sarah that more than likely the Terminator was wearing this bulletproof vest and was probably on PCP, and that's how he could go on and accomplish all the things that he was accomplishing. Traxler goes on to tell Sarah, as she's waiting for her mother to try to retrieve her, that maybe she should go on and sit on this couch and get some sleep. And that's where Traxler goes on to mention how there's 30 cops in this precinct, that she'll be safe. The Terminator makes his way to this police station counter and goes on to mention how he's a friend of Sarah Connor's, and he's hoping that he will meet with her because he knows that she's there. So the clerk goes on to say, well, yeah, like, if anything, she's making a statement now. If anything, you should probably just grab a seat. You're going to have to wait a while. So the Terminator looks around and is to make some measurements and then says that he will be back. The Terminator comes back all right with a massive car that he comes colliding through this clerk's office, and then continues on to go onto this rampage, grabbing all these guns, and starts blasting with this, I think, AK-47 and the shotgun through a number of cops while they're all sitting at these desks unaware of what is going on. The cops start to surround around the hallways, and the Terminator starts to lob them down and take them down one by one. Eventually, the Terminator gets to the circuit breaker and rips the wirings and cuts off the circuit breaker, which turns off the electricity, to where there is to only be the electric, or the emergency lights. Let's say that that turn on here. The emergency lights end up turning on, and so as Volkovich goes into the interrogation room to explain to the interrogator that if anything, keep Kyle into this room here. As Volkovich closes the door, Kyle knocks out the interrogator and takes his keys. Volkovich, as well as also Traxler, go on to get heavy machinery, or heavy artillery, is what I wanted to say there. They get machine guns. So Sarah goes on and realizes that as soon as she is to wake up here, that she is in jeopardy, and so she peels off to get underneath this desk, hoping that her hiding underneath this desk will save her from the Terminator. The Terminator goes on and starts blasting away at more cops through these cubicle-like desks, and eventually they get some pop shots off. These cops do. But again, the Terminator keeps rampaging through and mowing these guys down. Here is where Traxler starts to get some machine gun shots off, and then the Terminator whips out, I think, a shotgun and fires onto Traxler, taking him down. Volkovich ends up getting obviously upset, whipping out his machine gun to try and take out the Terminator. Obviously, the Terminator goes on and takes down Volkovich as well. And so Sarah is having to be forced to listen to all this carnage. And at some point, there is someone busting through this door to get into Sarah Connor's room. We come to find out that it's none other than Kyle, screaming out for Sarah. Sarah pops up from the desk, runs to Kyle, and the two of them run out of this police station, having the Terminator follow behind them. Kyle and Sarah make their way to this car as the Terminator is blasting away off in the distance to eventually see that they drive off, and so the Terminator follows them by foot to eventually go off frame. We then cut to both Kyle and Sarah that within this car lose gas, and so they take the car, they pull it off to the side, and they eventually will roll the car off the street to eventually make their way into this uh like I'll go and I'll say like it's a tunnel. Like it looks like a tunnel to me. Like it's kind of uh a little shelter spot. Maybe it's one of those like if ever there is to be like a tornado uh or tornado going on, you would hide underneath here to kind of brace for if there's a tornado going on. So it's like a hot spot for that. So we have Kyle and Sarah that are making their way to this tunnel of a place. Sarah's going on and mentioning how cold she is, and so Kyle is getting close to her for body heat. So Sarah is to only know Reese's last name, and so she asks for what his first is, and it's Kyle. Sarah asks what time travel is like, and Kyle says it's like a white light and it's pain, and it feels like being born. All of a sudden, Sarah notices that there's blood on her fingers or on her hand. She realizes that Kyle is all of a sudden bleeding, and Kyle's like, "Well, yeah, I got shot, but it's nothing." Sarah goes on and is to bandage the wound because she is like, "Hey, like you're bleeding to death," and Kyle goes to mention how it went right through and it's not really a problem, but Sarah is adamant. So Sarah goes on and bandages Kyle, and because of the sight of the blood, she starts to kind of feel ill. So Sarah wants something to distract her, and so she asks Kyle more about her son, her unborn son. So Kyle goes on and says he's about his height, goes on to say that he would die for John Connor, and Sarah's like, well, I guess it's a good thing I know what his name is, but do I know who the father is? And Kyle really has no idea. And John never talked about him. So, Sarah finds out that Connor sent Kyle there to the past. And Kyle says, like, well, yeah, I volunteered. I wanted to meet the legend. And I wanted to meet the woman who trained John Connor to accomplish all these things. And so Sarah is to go in and say, it's like, well, yeah, you're talking about things that I've not even done yet. And she goes on to be like, I don't think I can go on and sire a kid of the leader of the resistance if I can even balance my checkbook. So, if anything, Sarah doesn't, of course, want to be this person. And always, when everybody is to go on and say that to whatever this person is, like, if you were to go on and tell a person that they were God, they would not want they would not want to be God. Like, if you base, yeah, like that's going on and kind of being like, Wouldn't they know that they were gone? Yeah, they probably would. But like, but that's the whole thing. Like, uh, to tell anybody that they are to be a vital person to anything, um, like, yeah, a lot of people would want to go on and not want to be like, yeah, like there's some people that would love that responsibility of being like the leader, the guy that everyone, or guy or girl that everyone comes to, but also there's some people that are to, when they hear that they're to be like this big important thing, not everybody is to go on and be like, sure, I'll take that right on, and I'll like, and yeah, a lot of people are to be like, yeah, I don't want this, like I just want to go back to a normal life. Like, we start to see a wide variety every time we watch a movie or a show, how reluctant or unreluctant people are when things are thrusted in front of them, like how they're going to fold or how they're going to go on and how they're going to rise to the occasion. I think is what I really want to go with, instead of the whole God thing. Maybe that was a mistake. But anyways, so Kyle goes on and gives Sarah a message from John Connor himself, and was told to memorize it. Uh, Thank you, Sarah, for your courage through the dark years. Uh, to explain to you that the future is not set, and you must be stronger than you imagine you can be. You must survive, or I will never exist. So, Sarah then asks Kyle, okay, so tell me more about where you come from. Tell me about the future. So, Kyle starts to talk about hunter killers and how they have infrared, and eventually, all of a sudden, Sarah will start to drift off into sleep, and she'll be dreaming about what Kyle is telling her. So, we have Kyle that is with a number of resistance that are all going on and fighting off these hunter killers. But in this scene, Kyle is to go on and just be looking around and seeing where the hunter killers are, and then moving back to his base, to his ruins. So, as Kyle gets through this door where he has to explain who he is to these people, and then these dogs are to sniff him, Kyle goes on and sees a number of the future of almost homeless people. They all look very disheveled. They're all crying. As Kyle starts to pass by a number of people, there's a random kid who like pretends that he's shooting, and Kyle gets his gun out as a pretend thing, like like yeah, I can have a few seconds of fun. Kyle goes on and notices that a woman is using her TV as a fireplace, and so Kyle just plops down utterly exhausted, and eventually is to look at the picture of Sarah Connor that we see by the end of the film was taken as a Polaroid. All of a sudden, the people that are at the door letting more people in, we come to find that one of them ends up kind of slipping by the notice of people, as well as these dogs going off, and it ends up being a Terminator. The Terminator whips out this big blaster weapon and starts killing people. The Terminator starts to make its way through this tunnel as we have Kyle taking out his gun, trying to take out the Terminator. Eventually leaving in a big explosion, and Kyle finding the picture of Sarah Connor now getting burnt. And all we see is the Terminator with its glowing eyes coming further into frame. So Kyle goes on and touches Sarah Connor's face, which wakes her up, having her mention about how she was dreaming about dogs, and Kyle mentions about how the dogs are there so that way they can track down the Terminators. So now we cut to the Terminator that is in his hotel again, and we have this janitor that is be knocking on the door, asking whether or not that there is a dead cat in this guy's room, because we start to see the bugs flying around. The Terminator has to go on and give this random bit of response, and the one he comes up with was "F you a hole," and so that gets the guy to go away. So the Terminator starts thumbing through Sarah's address book and finds her mother's cabin at the Big Bear and the phone number of it and the address. So the Terminator goes on and leaves to make his way to the mother's cabin, hoping that Sarah is going to make her way there, or otherwise going on using uh, Sarah's mother's cabin as a way to hopefully get to Sarah. Now we cut to both Sarah and Kyle that have made their way to this tiki motel. And Kyle is to have this handful of crumpled up money that he's like, hey, would this be enough for a room? And so Sarah's like, I think that's gonna be enough. Just don't ask me where you got it. Sarah goes on and asks for a room, and Kyle is to ask for a room with a kitchen. So as they get into the hotel room, Kyle mentions how he's gonna go for supplies. Kyle hands Sarah this gun, and then he leaves. Sarah goes on, makes a phone call, calling her mother, explaining that she doesn't know how much she can really tell her mother, but eventually she goes on and gives her at least the phone number of where she's at. Uh, Eventually, we'll come to find that Sarah's mother's cabin's home is to have been wrecked, and the Terminator is on the phone call answering Sarah in Sarah's mother's voice. So, immediately after Sarah hangs up, the Terminator calls the phone number location and finds out that it's the Tiki Motel and asks for the address to immediately track them down. Sarah sees Kyle coming back, and he comes back with a number of oddball items: corn syrup, mothballs, ammonia. What a weird grocery list. So Sarah's to go on and be like, okay, what's for dinner? And Kyle says plastique, and she's like, sounds great. So Kyle is to say that he had made these explosives as a kid, and it seems that this could be the turning of the tide of their battle with the Terminator. So the Terminator makes his way onto this motorcycle to make his way to the Tiki Motel, as Kyle and Sarah are trying to go on and put together these explosives. Kyle's to tell her to be gentle with them, or otherwise they could be dangerous. So, Kyle and Sarah have a heart-to-heart moment because Sarah goes on and asks Kyle about whether or not he was to have ever had a woman in the future, or also to talk about women. And Kyle is to just talk about how brave they are and they're good fighters. And Sarah's like, no, that's not what I meant. Like, do you have like a woman in the future? And Kyle's like, no, I never did. So Kyle talks about how in his future, how he used to take pain and kind of disconnect it from the rest of his body and almost be as almost robotic as the cyborg that he's facing. But Sarah is to go on and explain to Kyle, it's like, so you feel nothing. And Kyle says, like, well, hey, John had given me a picture of you once. And I didn't know why at the time, but it was very old and faded. And you were as young as you look now. And in the picture, when Kyle looked at it, he saw that Sarah just looked sad. And he was just so curious why. Like, he wanted to know what she was thinking in that picture. And he had memorized every line of that picture, but also, again, like, Kyle would not have gone on to figure out it was Sarah Connor right away either. So how did he memorize the picture? But it was so hard for him to go on and find her in the tech noir. But I guess he wouldn't have gone on and rushed her and told her everything and grabbed her. But he kind of does that anyways. Um, I get like I guess it just wasn't perfect for the movie. So Kyle says that he had volunteered. He had come across time for Sarah, and Kyle says that he does love Sarah, and then he realizes what a mistake he is by saying that. He goes on and he starts slamming. Wait a minute. So, like, he tells Sarah to be like, "Hey, like, don't go on and don't like and be gentle with that." But then Kyle takes the explosive and just crams into the backpack, and he's like, "I never should have said that." So Sarah grabs Kyle and the two of them kiss. They go into the bed and they start banging it out. There isn't much that I can really say here besides that, like, there's the iconic hand holding move where they go on and they like clutch their hands together and they let it go, and like that's the end of like the ecstasy or climaxing that we're supposed to see here. Kyle goes on and protects Sarah's body pretty well, to where there's not much you could really see here, but I think that is kind of like a nice thing to do anyways. Um, but anyways, we now cut to the Terminator making his way through the bike to Kyle and Sarah's hotel. Sarah goes on and throws the backpack at Kyle, or has it. Blah. Sarah goes on and has the backpack, and she pretends to throw the backpack at Kyle, but then she like holds onto the backpack in like like I was tricking you. So the Terminator passes by and a dog starts barking. Here's where both Kyle and Sarah notice that the Terminator is coming by because of the dog barking. And so by the time that the Terminator makes his way into the hotel or motel and starts blasting away, both Sarah and Kyle have made their way into this truck and are to eventually ram into the Terminator, to eventually have the Terminator running back into his motorcycle to chase off after them. At some point, we should really just have Sarah Connor freaking drive cars at this point. Because every single time, Kyle is to have her take over anyways, just so that way he can go on and fire off a shotgun. Or at this point, also, he is the one throwing the plastique. So Sarah goes on and points out that they should be throwing the plastique. And so Kyle tells Sarah to trade places. Sarah goes on and starts driving, and so Kyle starts hucking the plastique. Eventually, we see a number of explosives, but none of them really are to take down the Terminator. At some point, the Terminator goes on and starts blasting Kyle, and then an explosive goes off nearby. And then Sarah goes on and crashes into the motorcycle, and the truck goes on and starts to flip. As the Terminator lays down on the ground of the road, we'd have this massive truck with this gas tank that's in the trailer of it runs down the Terminator, and we start to see the body parts of the Terminator going flopping all over the place through the truck. And we'd have the truck driver with the passenger next to him be like, "Hey, stay here. I'm going to figure out what happened." So the truck driver gets out of the car, makes his way behind to the gas tank, and eventually immediately ends up getting taken out by the Terminator. The Terminator makes his way into the truck, looking at the passenger, and tells him to get out, which obviously he does. So Sarah is now telling Kyle, we need to get out of here, and continues to yell for Kyle so that way he'll wake up enough to drag himself out of there. So Sarah and Kyle are both running away from this tanker truck that's behind them. Kyle eventually can't go on and be able to figure out how to uh, get his body moving well enough to be able to move anymore. So he decides that he's going to have Sarah continue to run while he goes on and puts a plastic into the back of this muffler of this tanker and then jump into this dumpster as the explosive goes off. After the explosive of this tanker goes off, Sarah is to see the body of the Terminator be engulfed in flames, falls onto the ground, and Sarah is assumed that they have finally beaten him. That if anything, like, well, yeah, the explosion, the flame, that should all have taken it out, right? No. So, as Sarah makes her way back to Kyle and is to assume that they did it, all of a sudden, the Terminator is to lose its human tissue and is to now be the metal skeleton. It is now chasing after both Kyle and Sarah. Kyle looks back, sees the Terminator, and realizes that they need to run. So they make their way into this warehouse as the Terminator is kind of slow to a crawl, kind of hobbling its way to get to them. Kyle and Sarah put locks all over this door and then eventually realize that they need to turn on all these machines so that way the Terminator can't spot them. Man, we're almost over 2 hours. Man, I wish I could have gone on and gone this under 2 hours, but it's not going to happen. God dang it. I think the original review was also 1 hour also, and I think that that didn't really go on and do much. So I don't think this will do much either, sadly. But oh well. Like, I don't know. I'm not going to go on and try to redo this so I can get this done quicker. This movie is kind of complex, I feel. So if anything, if I get double the time of the other review, it is what it is. I'm sorry. If anything, I'm sure a lot of people would just be annoyed of how lengthy these videos are. But if anything, also, I think if you look at it, I had 20 minutes going on and roughly explaining this film. That's all that people really need to watch, and then that's all you really need to see. The first 20 to 30 minutes of this video. So that's why this video is probably that long. It probably could have been way shorter. So Kyle collapses from all of his injuries right near this desk as the door is getting busted open from this Terminator, and the Terminator is trying to go on and get all these locks, all these off of this door, so he can make his way further in to get to Sarah and Kyle. As Kyle collapses, Sarah is forcing and willing Kyle back to get going, as Kyle is like, no, like, just leave me here, like, because Kyle realizes that he's probably going to die. Sarah goes on and tells Kyle, like, get up, soldier, come on. So she's like figuring out a way to like strategically, like psychologically keep him to keep going. Because she knows that she needs him anyways. And then also they just had sex, so yeah, Sarah's gonna want to keep him alive. Either way, because she does love him. Or it seems like she does. She didn't say it, but he did. So as the Terminator makes his way into the factory of the warehouse, he starts to see a number of machines and he's having a hard time tracking Sarah and Kyle. Kyle and Sarah make their way through the warehouse, and here's where Kyle pulls out this iron rod to use it as a weapon because they have nothing else left to use as a weapon of anything. So Kyle and Sarah are to reach a dead end that all they see is just this bit of stairs. So they have nowhere left to go, and then all of a sudden the Terminator appears and like, "Hi, I'm gonna kill you now." So Kyle has Sarah go up the stairs first, and then Kyle goes on to eventually start to lob away the Terminator with this iron rod. At some point, also, the Terminator slaps Kyle away, and Kyle does one last thing that he has left to do, which is to light another fuse of this plastique, shove it into the hip of this Terminator bot, and then he falls down the stairs, and that is to be the definitive thing that kills him here, that explodes the Terminator, and Sarah's probably draw the conclusion that maybe finally it's dead now, but then all of a sudden, Sarah then goes on to adjust her leg that either may be broken or may be just be something that has really been stretched out. So Sarah drags herself back to Kyle, seeing him dead, and then all of a sudden the Terminator, with half of its body left, is rolling over Kyle's body, trying to get to Sarah, having then Sarah and the Terminator make their way crawling through this warehouse for Sarah to get back to the compactor that they had accidentally hit the button of earlier that compresses things. And so as Sarah crawls and noticing that the Terminator is slowly behind her, Sarah, by the end of this compactor, throws this little gate down, and the Terminator arm comes out, and Sarah goes on to say, "You're Terminator," and Sarah hits the button. The compression comes down, crushes the Terminator, to eventually have arms and chips eventually to be in sequel of Judgment Day 2, which so they're going to go on and get the future tech anyways that eventually will turn into Skynet, because Skynet is kind of inevitable. Like Judgment Day is inevitable. Like they've gone on to really just kind of say like, man, you guys could not have gone on and figured out a way to not have relied on this artificial life form of AI, and now it's kind of gone on to just do you in, uh, because you guys could not have gone on with a different way. Um, anyways, so as Sarah gets hauled away uh, off to this ambulance, and we see that Kyle's body bag is to be zip closed, definitively telling us that if we don't realize that he was dead, we now see the body bag that he is now. So next we see Sarah driving in this Jeep to have recordings for her son, so that way it's all fresh in her mind, to go on and explain about everything that Kyle had talked to her about. Um, so that way it's just like, just in case that if all this is really all true, then Connor will have these files of all these tape recordings from his mother, and we'll see in Terminator Salvation that Connor will have kept all those to kind of replay all of them. So Sarah makes her way to this gas station, and we see that she is pregnant. She all of a sudden is to be stopped by a kid who is to take a Polaroid of her and demands $5 American, or his father will beat him. And we'd have Sarah that's like, oh yeah, like, nice hustle, kid. So Sarah goes on and gives the kid $5, gets the picture, And as the gas station attendant is to talk about a storm coming, Sarah says, I know, and drives off, and the credits roll. With that said, holy crap, we got 2 hours past. Well, at least I've kind of stuck to at least around 2 hours of all of these reviews. And then also, if I wouldn't have gone into that whole crawl of that first 20 odd minutes, this would probably be under 2 hours, but it doesn't matter anyways because it's too lengthy of a video. But at least, again, I'm to have fun. At least, like, this was done in a very limited amount of takes because that was the reason why I was kind of pushing to do everything that I was doing for this because I wanted a limited amount of takes because I had other videos that I had planned to try to accomplish today. Plus, also, like, the quicker I can get this done, the quicker I can do another project and get these out in a very reasonable time. Because the videos I'm going to be putting out are the ones that are going to be put out today. Because I probably could have other projects that I could be putting out instead of these. But I'm like, no, I want to kind of get these out. I think they're the most important ones. But it also kind of sucks because I'm having to kind of like do the videos that are out today. And then I'm like, well, like, what's tomorrow? I have to go and basically do the videos for tomorrow. Because I have to do the videos for tomorrow. Because that's my plan. Because I have all these videos that I have planned out to do, and hopefully I'll go in and I'll nail all those at some point. Because yeah, like I'm gonna go on and do these kind of these bigger action films, and I'm gonna go on and hope that all of them do really well on the channel. Because there were some where I was kind of hoping that they were gonna do really well, and they are just kind of they're just there. So at some point I'll go on and I'll eventually at some point get bigger titles that people will be more interested in, but it'll all just be a matter of time. I think a lot of people are to go on and probably also probably like, man, like should be getting like bigger and better titles at this point out. Yeah, like if anything, also like for me, like I'm again to say that all of this is just so early that like at some point we'll get things going. Like I wasn't expecting to right off the bat do like extremely well either with this channel. So I was kind of like timelining it to say like that. Like it'll probably take a good long while um, for me to start seeing anywhere the numbers that I did in the previous channel. Um, but even that, like I don't even know if I'll get to those kind of numbers again. Because I'm kind of going back to the same stuff that I like. And plus, also like there was so many new releases. There was a lot of better times to do reviews when I did that other channel. Like this is more of like a struggle to get anything out. So I don't know. Uh, there's nothing more I can say than like, yeah, this is very early. There's a lot of projects I never did on the other channel that I can do here that I think are gonna do well. Um, it's all about just kind of like finally getting to really put all this on myself to be like, okay, like uh, I kind of was to feel that like I did so well on the other channel. Now it's time to really prove it, and like I'm trying to put all this on myself uh, to hope that whatever I choose in the following bits of time here, as well as also the help of everyone involved in this channel, because it's not just me. I think too often times I make this too much about me, and it's not. It's about me and other people. So I hope that people will not take this part of the video and just being like, oh well, yeah, like it takes a village, buddy, and I get it. Um, it's like other people have to go on and want to get into this content and watch it. Um, so yeah, so it's all about just trying to put my best foot forward every time I do a review. And this won't be it, but maybe Terminator 2 will be a bigger, impactful thing on here. Maybe sequels down the road will be more interesting to people. Maybe all of the projects that I will do going on into the future of this will be more interesting. I hope, because I'm going on and I'm getting like the bigger titles, and I'm trying to at some points try and recreate the prior channel, but also like I want to try to see if I can do something different. Because I don't want to just rely on everything of the past and hoping that I can just recreate that, because that's not going to happen. Like it's not going to work. I was lucky that time around. Plus, also like again, it's so early. It's so early. So I've only done a plus. Also, like I feel like what all of how I'm doing this is like, man, this is crazy. Like I'm doing like 2 videos a day, and I'm doing them every like 2 days. So like I feel like I'm already gonna go on and gonna start matching where I left off view wise on the last channel by just keep coming into this, keep just piping away at putting these videos out, and I think I will have a better upswing in the future. The more I just really uh, just really focus on what could be the best possible video to put out on the channel. I don't know. I don't know. I'm making all these statements, and eventually they'll mean nothing. If anything, it's just kind of like re-justifying to myself that like I just need to believe in myself and believe in the channel and and believe that I took this gamble and it'll all pay out. It'll all work out in the end. Um, Man, did I have to go through a lot of avenues and a lot of learning curves and a lot of trials and tribulations, I guess. Bring out the violins, everybody, to get to where I am now. Um, but at least I feel that the harder part was over. Now it's probably getting to the point of the easier part of just getting uh, the hours to kind of all sync together and finally get monetized in this channel. Hopefully this time around it doesn't take as many videos as it did the other channel. Hopefully it doesn't take as long as it did the other channel. Well, this channel took forever to get monetized, and then quickly the day after that, it got unmonetized. So I don't know. Hopefully, either way, like this time around, it's a lot quicker. And hopefully, with the help of all of you, it does go quicker. Because again, uh, like I feel at this point, I'm trying to say to everybody, like there is a lot of times where I think that I feel that like I had all of this kind of writing on me, and I didn't think that I really needed to ask for help. I didn't think that that was a thing that I was gonna go on and like I didn't think I need to. I didn't think I really needed to survey people. I didn't think I really needed to interact. I could just do videos and they just do well, and that's all I needed to do. That's all I assumed to do. Plus, also that's all I thought that I had time for. Um, but yeah, because all this stuff kind of gets really crazy with all the stuff that I have to put together for every day. So, but now I'm honestly really asking people for help. Hoping that this time around, this time I'm more successful, because this is going to be definitively for how well that this is doing compared to where I was leaving off my other channel. Like at this point, like this is the definitive. Like if this does not go, if I invest this much time in it, then and if it doesn't go um, to a monetizational point, I'm just like I think at this point it's just we have to uh, finally just say that I've invested too much time in this. That this is just an impossible task. Uh, because yeah, all I need is just the watch time hours. That's all I need. So hopefully people watch a lot of these, a lot of the videos. That's all that matters at this point now. So because yeah, I've gotten over the 1,000 subscriber marker. All I just need is just people to watch things. Please, for the love of God, just watch stuff. Um, anyways, so with that said, I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy.